Hi, it's Lerald, and the PoE Early Access launch is less than a week away. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I've made my decision on what build, what class and build I want to play first in the PoE 2 beta, the tools I've used along the way, and kind of the thought process and so on that I've used in making that decision for myself so that hopefully it can help you as well. Alright, let's get into it, but first, like and subscribe. Okay, so I would say that there are two main resources, I guess technically three main resources that I've been using. One is PoE2 db.tw. This is just the successor to regular PoE DB, which is obviously a fantastic website, really valuable in PoE 1, and then now there is a separate website for PoE 2 as well. There's a lot of information on this website. There are incomplete lists of a lot of different things: skill gems, support gems, and spirit gems, auras for lack of a better word. There is also a semi-complete version of the skill tree that kind of, they're searchable. There's definitely, like, I could just type in Leech, right? And I could find different things that affect Leech, so on. So obviously this is incomplete. This is definitely not like anything close to PoB, right? But it is a good way to just kind of get the creative juices flowing, kind of think about the general idea of a build. This combination of these three things coming from this website, along with the skill tree that they have linked there. And then also there's a written version of all the ascendancy nodes that were talked about in the second resource that I found really useful, which is just simply the PoE2, the GGG live event in-game content reveal. That was also put up as a VOD on YouTube, and then there's all the ascendancy classes, and I've just kind of watched that section a lot. I think it's been really illustrative of, along with all the rest of the footage from this video, of just like what they want each class to look like, what they want each ascendancy to be like, and kind of how they differentiate each other, from the other. And then finally, there's the PoE2 wiki, again, just like the PoE2 DB, just PoEwiki.net, now PoE2wiki.net. This is still obviously very much a work in progress. We're coming up to version 0.1, so very much a work in progress, but there is still like some valuable information in here. Like if you look up Poison, for example, Poison works quite a bit differently from how it does in PoE 1, where you can stack it infinitely. In PoE 2, it is, we don't exactly know what the percentage of the hit is, but it has a default stack limit of 1, and then you're going to increase it further. I'm kind of going to talk about that a little further on. Okay, so I kind of want to talk about the Elden Ring in the room as well. PoE 2 has drawn massive numbers of comparisons to Elden Ring and Dark Souls, and not only because games journalists can't help themselves when it comes to comparing things to Dark Souls. I went to the store on the day after Thanksgiving. It was the Dark Souls of shopping trips, but also because it has a lot of that Elden Ring DNA in the game. I mean, the developers have explicitly said that they spent a ton of time playing Elden Ring during development of this game in its early phases, and it has a lot of influence there, right? There's also a dodge roll, so yeah, it's Dark Souls 4, sure, why not? Now, with all that being said, I am a big Dark Souls fan. I technically have been playing them since Demon Souls, not because I'm cool. I had a cool roommate in college who got me into them, and that comparison really made me want to play a similar style of build in PoE 2 as I normally do in Elden Ring and Dark Souls, which is like a fast-moving melee character. I would say my two favorite build types in Elden Ring are Strength Faith and Dex Int, and unfortunately I don't really think there's anything in PoE 2 right now that will fit the Unga Bunga in the name of God Strength Faith archetype, but a Speedy Dex Int playstyle is exactly what Monk in PoE 2 is supposed to be. So that got me looking at Monk from the word go, really excited about that. And then you combine that with the recap from the in-game content reveal at the GGG live event, and Monk just really stood out to me as being fast and fun, and just really caught my interest ahead of every other class. I also really have an interest in doing a lot of the bosses. I think bosses are kind of the most interesting thing that GGG does. They're, other than maybe FromSoft, I think they're one of the two game companies that make the most exciting bosses in the gaming industry. And so I really want to kind of feel those bosses, and I do think Melee is going to kind of feel it and have more fun engaging with the bosses than ranged, at least for me. But with that being said, I do have a lot of love for Pathfinder from PoE 1. I like ranger builds and ARPGs just generally, I like moving fast. Being ranged is usually a big advantage in the RPGs, usually. And so I wanted to really sit down and explore the possibility of playing Pathfinder as my first character. So I took a deep dive on all the skills on the PoE2 DB site and made a spreadsheet out of some basic data from all of those skill and support and so on gem pages, and spent a lot of time considering Pathfinder build options, how I think it would play, kind of the way that skills would chain together, and made my decision on whether I wanted to play that as my first character or as something I come back to later. So this is the spreadsheet that I've cooked up. It's not like super duper complex or anything, but I just kind of wanted to talk about what it looks like the skills look like so far. Again, incomplete list, it's fine. So if we look at the number of skills that are available at each class, Mercenary and Warrior kind of have the lowest number. Mercenary has a lot of different ammo types and grenade types, so a lot of very similar feeling skills. And of course, like, right, you're able to swap back and forth. I mean, you're able to use other classes' skills as long as you have the right weapon equipped. A Sorceress could use a Witch skill, or, I mean, they could use, like, Leech Slam from the Warrior if they wanted to set it up right. But these are like the kind of skills that line up with the spirit of the class, okay? So 15 skills for Mercenary, and most of them are ammos and, like, you know, different types of bolts and different types of grenades. I think there's sort of like a isometric third-person shooter kind of gameplay loop that they're looking for with the Mercenary that seems kind of fun, but not really the way that I first want to engage with the game. Bit too different from original PoE 2 for my taste. I think Monk, it has a lot of, as we can see, like, it has a lot of skills that interact with charges. I kind of put a couple of categories here, like curses / marks. I kind of categorize those out. Charge skills, either charge generators or charge consumers to, like, have some extra effect. Monk has a lot of interaction with power charges, I think, mostly. There's not really a lot of chaos skills associated with most of the different classes. Witch is like the one that really stands out as having a bunch of chaos damage over time stuff. Ranger, to kind of a surprising degree, didn't really have that much chaos flagged stuff. It did have some poison flagged stuff, but really not that much in the way of chaos. And then, you know, if you look at like fire, it's basically all Sorc in terms of fire, very little bit of warrior and mercenary. Monk is kind of a big cold class, and just based on some of the feedback I've seen from other people, it seems like being able to AoE freeze, or even single target freeze, but just freeze as a mechanic is insanely strong. And also different from how it worked in PoE 1 is that freeze is something that you kind of build up. Again, if you've ever played Elden Ring, you know about hitting an enemy until they are stunned. You kind of have this building up counter that's like slowly degrading over time. It's hidden, but you hit them enough times, hard enough, and you will stagger them. They'll be stunned. That's sort of how physical damage, big physical hits seem to work in PoE 2, and the same goes for freeze, and I think most of the other elemental ailments as well, but freeze is kind of the big standout one. It's really just being a cheat code. You know, you just shut the enemy off for a while, and then there are some combos that you can do out of freeze to, like, add a bunch of extra damage as well. So I think that really is a big point in Monk's favor, that they have so much in the way of cold skills. Sorceress also has the same thing. I think these are two classes that are certainly Sorceress. I've heard a lot of people say that they think it's going to be really strong. I think Monk could be strong for the same reason. The ability to really control a lot of enemies is very valuable. And then Lightning, kind of going back to Diablo 2, has always been sort of an inconsistent damage type where it can do absolutely huge amounts of damage. It can be really good. Shock is definitely a good mechanic. So being able to combine freeze and shock together to kind of boost all of your damage and also keep enemies CC'd is just very appealing. Now, there were a couple of things I noticed in looking through all of the skill gems and reading all of these. I noticed, and I put them in my spreadsheet here, were a lot of references to spears and to bear. I feel confident in saying that spear is huntress stuff, which is very interesting to me. And then bear is obviously druid. GGG has said that those will be the first two classes they add once they start doing patches midway through the early access. And so obviously those are just things that have been data mined that come from those two classes, right? Kind of is what it is. I also kind of categorized a couple of other things. Skills that are cooldowns, they said they didn't really want to use cooldowns all that much as a way to, like, I don't know, make big skills that are strong. They kind of want to have you comboing stuff together, but there are still some skills that I think understandably have cooldowns. Some stuff like roars, war cries, that kind of thing that makes sense to have cooldowns, but really not that many in the grand scheme of how many skills there are. There are also a lot of trigger conditions. These are kind of scattered all over the place. Like if I just type in trigger in the skill gems search area here, there's all kinds of stuff. Cast on melee kill, cast on melee stun, cast while channeling. But then there's also, I believe some either in spirit gems. Yeah, there are some spirit gems. Cast on freeze, cast on shock, cast on ignite, cast on minion death, cast on crit. And then I don't think there are really any of those sort of like triggerable setup things in the support gem section. Yeah, pretty much just skill gems or spirit gems that you can kind of use to then cast other things, which again, kind of considering that this is a class that's going to be using both dexterity and int, being able to hook up some actual spell casts and have those go out for free on top of some damage, even if you're just using them for utility, I think that's also very, very appealing. And then in terms of minions, part of the reason why Witch has so many more skills than everything else, 25 is 10 of those are minions, 3 of those are offerings, sort of buffs that they have. I think one's a totem, a lot of them are curses, 4 of them are curses. And yeah, just a lot of curses available to witches, a lot of buffing and so on. All right, so let's get into kind of what I was looking at when I was thinking about would I want to play a ranger, would I want to try and put together the equivalent of Toxic Rain Pathfinder or Caustic Arrow Pathfinder or something in this game, and then just kind of look at the skills that I looked at, then kind of tried to see if this would kind of work. So I started by looking at like poison skills and stuff that's more tied to the ranger. I think gas arrow made sense, right? It throws down some poisonous gas, and then if you have a detonator, which we have a detonator somewhere in the kit as well. I believe it's actually flagged as a detonator. There we go, detonating arrow. So you kind of have a combo, gas arrow and detonating arrow, right? 1-2, pretty basic. Not really that toxic rainy of a feeling. But then there was some other stuff like toxic growth, which is sort of a toxic rain, not exactly, but it's a bunch of poison pustules, maybe closer to like toxic rain of spore burst or something. It's an interesting concept, but it didn't really feel, it doesn't have anything where it like attaches vines or anything like that. It is very much a delay that then explodes and can do some poison damage. And then there's also poison burst arrow that fires an arrow and poisons enemies and kind of creates a burst of poison. Seemed a bit like caustic arrow of poison. The point being that there were a couple of like 1-2 combos where you could throw out this and then blow it up, or you could throw out these pods and then hit them with a poison. Couple of like little 1-2 combos, but nothing that really quite caught my interest in the same way. And then I found this skill, Vine Arrow, and I realized this is basically like a merger of Caustic Arrow and Toxic Rain, where it fires one arrow and then it causes one plant to spawn and latch like vines onto nearby enemies and do chaos damage over time and slow them. So this is interesting. This is, instead of like Toxic Rain, this is like one Toxic Rain pod. So I think if you really wanted to simulate Toxic Rain, you would hook this up to like multiple projectiles, and I think that could work, but then you're going to be losing damage. I, don't know if they're going to spread out in some way, and if you're going to have to then balance out area of effect to get multiple of them to latch on, or if that's not even possible. It's just too many unknowns, and then there's really not any sort of interaction other than that going on with this. It's all damage over time, and it's not poison, so it's pretty hard to actually get anything to synergize with that, especially if we look at the passive tree. We look up like poison. There is a handful of stuff available in the passive tree for poison. There is stacking toxins. You can poison enemies a second time or an extra time, but it's slightly less effective. There's low tolerance, which is much weaker than it is in its current PoE 1 version, 60% instead of 30, but still, good to get damage kind of going. Just leeching toxins, basic toxin damage increase, poison damage notable. Very creative name, but it is exactly what you would think. And then we have like escalating toxins, which I do actually think is quite interesting. 10% more, or I should say increased poison duration for each poison you've inflicted recently, up to a maximum of 100. So this isn't like per target, so you could very easily poison a pack of 10 guys or something, and now all of your poisons are going to be double duration. That's pretty good. And then you have building toxins for 25% reduced poison duration, but a second, or again, additional poison. So you're able to get to 3 poisons just by taking stacking toxins and building toxins, and that's pretty good. If we type in Pathfinder in the Ascendancy section here. We do have a couple of poison interacting notables here. We have overwhelming toxicity, double the number of poisons you can inflict on enemies, 35% less poison duration. So that's a pretty big increase in the number of poisons. You can go from 3 to 6, but you're getting reduced effect and you're getting reduced duration, 25% reduced duration, and then also 35% less duration. So that's a pretty substantial drop in the amount of uptime on your poisons. And because poisons are capped, the way that you really want to use them is you kind of want to treat it the same way you would bleed or ignite in PoE 1, where you want to hit real big. And I don't really know how big any of these poison hits are going to be. So it just feels like a lot of downsides to really kind of gamble on that initial hit actually being big enough to compensate for all those downsides. At the same time, Contagious Contamination, the most damaging poison on enemies you kill, spreads to other enemies within 1.5 meters. That sounds okay, but if I look up, I believe it's in the support gems. Oh, here it is, Herald of Plague. It's a spirit gem. It's an aura, 30 spirit aura. Herald of Plague spreads the most damaging poison on enemies you kill in a 1.6 meter radius, so, technically larger than the Pathfinder version. And then you also even get the added benefit of a chance to hinder enemies when you spread poison. So you are effectively spending an entire ascendancy point just to get like a 30 spirit aura. This isn't really all that great to me. Now, maybe they stack with each other. That would be okay. You get 2 poisons to spread instead of 1. Not the worst thing in the world, but again, a lot of downside happening between these 2 poison nodes here. And there's just a lot of like redundancy in what the Pathfinder does, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're able to take multiple of them, but nothing really kind of wowed me. Another one here is Running Assault. This idea that Running Assault and Relentless Pursuit, you're immune to slows, you are less slowed when moving. That's a big thing in PoE 2, that you're able to move and use bows at the same time. But the problem with either of these, really, with Relentless Pursuit or Running Assault, is that the summon row amount exists and is available to, technically any class, although really it's only going to be that valuable for Pathfinders, but that's another reservation aura, 50 spirit aura, that gives you, I believe it's either like 50% less movement speed penalty or maybe no movement speed penalty when using skills while moving, and they've showed it off. They showed it off at some point in the in-game content reveal as well, this idea that you can like run around on a Roa as a ranger while shooting your bow and be very fast, or you could spend a higher ascendancy point on it. Not really all that thrilled about it. Now, Enduring Elixirs, the life flasks lasting and being going over cap, that is still in, and it doesn't have the 50% healing penalty that it does in PoE 1, which is really great. But as you can see here, there is no ascendancy that just gives you flat charge generation over time. That seems to be dead. Instead, Connected Chemistry makes it so that your flash charges gained are doubled, which seems a lot worse because it means you are actually required to kill enemies. So in bossing, 2 times 0 is still going to be 0. It's not nearly as impressive. So this is all the kind of stuff that I was grappling with when I was questioning, is Pathfinder bad? I don't think so. I think Traveler's Wisdom, the 5 extra passive skill points, is pretty amazing as an ascendancy node. I definitely think of Pathfinder as being like a generalist that has some really good potential for poisons, but at least for the way I kind of want to play it, I think until there's like more poison skills in, basically once they put the shadow into the game, that I think is when I'm really interested in playing Pathfinder, and until that point, not so much. All right, now I've heard a lot of noise around the Acolyte of Chayula Monk. I think Embrace the Darkness was something that really stood out to people as being pretty interesting. I'm gonna bust out my calculator here for a little bit of like very basic math. So what this does is it removes all your spirit, which does mean it takes away, I think it means it takes away your ability to reserve any auras. You do need spirit to reserve them, and you can't do that. And instead it gives you kind of a third health bar called Darkness that for each life or energy shield point you lose, you reserve 1 instead. So at its base, it's 100 flat extra quote-unquote life. That seems terrible, but you get 5 per level. So I think if we're assuming maybe a little higher than the average ascendancy, first ascendancy in PoE 1. Maybe you're like level 35. 35 times 5 is 175 plus 100. That's an extra 275 life at the time that you're doing your first ascendancy. That might be good. It might not be. Now, what's notable is there is no increased maximum life. If we look up maximum life in the passive tree, they had said that there was going to be absolutely none. It turns out there actually is, I think, one, maybe 2 nodes in here. Here we go. Unbending, 3% increased max life, 30% increased stun threshold. So that's 1. But then there's like max life as armor. That's not anything. There's a reduced maximum life node. I think there might be another one in here somewhere else. Yeah, heavy buffer, 40% max energy shield and 10% max reduced max life. So there's more reduced max life than there is increased max life. So maybe getting an extra 275 to 300 flat life, maybe that's good. What I don't know about the way that this works, and I'll want to know before I really can recommend this, is the way that it works is when you take damage, you reserve that darkness pool, right? But what we don't know is it lasts for 10 seconds. If you take 1 hit, let's say you have like 500 darkness, you take a 100 point hit, and then 5 seconds later, you take a 1,000 point hit and you consume all the rest of it. Will it be 5 seconds until you unreserve that first 100, or do you have to wait the full 10 of not taking any damage in order for it to all unreserve? I assume that it works the former way, the way that is better, the way that sucks less, but you never know. It could be really, really punishing and not that great. The second node here, the kind of dependency on having Embrace the Darkness is Grasp of the Void, gain 1% of damage as extra chaos per 20% 20 unreserved darkness. So if you have like 500 darkness, 500 divided by 20, that's like 25% more damage. That's potentially very good. You're probably not going to have, what would you need to be at 500 darkness? 400 divided by 5. That's like level 80. I think that's pretty attainable. The problem is, of course, that you need to not take damage. So I kind of like that gameplay loop of avoiding taking damage so that it increases your damage. I do like having reasons not to face tank things. This could be really good in conjunction with like an evasive playstyle, and actually wearing evasion could be good. However, if you're just taking a lot of hits and there's not really anything you can do about it, then this might wind up being kind of a stinker of a point. And Embrace the Darkness, similarly, might not really wind up being a lot of damage reduction. So this could be 2 points wasted. Not really all that great. What is pretty great is Ravenous Doubts. Getting all your mana leech to be instant on its own is okay. It definitely helps with not really having to, do this. If I think that's being picked up on my mic, but like just the spamming your mana flask all the time is pretty annoying. And then being able to combine that with consuming questions. You can't recharge energy shield, but your mana leech affects your also recover energy shield, and then it's also instant because of Ravenous Doubts. That is very appealing, and there's some really good stuff if we look up energy shield and then also leech in the tree. There's some really good stuff that I think really synergizes nicely with this, and I think also just works really well with the potential for a Chaos Inoculation build. I like Chaos Inoculation, not even having to worry about Chaos damage is always a good thing. And then there's just really, really good energy shield stuff throughout the tree, like right here at Enhanced Barrier, 25 max energy shield, 1 max all res, pretty good. Heavy Buffer, 40% max energy shield, 10% max life. Doesn't really matter if you're taking Chaos Inoculation. That'll work. Inner Faith, another one. 20% max evasion and energy shield and 25% reduced effective curses. Incredibly good. Melding, another talent that seems like really good. 40% max energy shield, 10% reduced max mana. Incredible. So there's lots and lots of stuff in here that I think synergizes really, really beautifully with running an energy shield. Spectral Ward kind of taking that Trickster notable from PoE 1, giving you energy shield based on the evasion rating on your body armor. Pretty sweet. At the same time, you can also take Mind Over Matter so that your damage will be taken from mana before life. And as you can see, it says all damage. It's not like 30 or 40% like it's been in PoE 1. It is 100%. So it reduces your mana recovery rate, which doesn't matter if you are insta-leeching all your mana. And then similarly, you can take Eternal Youth, which makes it so that your energy shield recharge applies to life. But if you don't have any life and you can't recharge energy shield, that downside doesn't matter. And then your life recovery from flasks will still apply to energy shield. So you are able to still run a life flask while playing like Eternal Youth and Chaos Inoculation, and Mind Over Matter. Now, I can see that this is quite a lot of stretching around the tree to start over here on this corner and kind of come up to Eternal Youth and make our way around here over into the, like, Templar-ish area. It's possible this could wind up being good, but, you know, stretching over to Mind Over Matter might not be worth it. But I do see this as the potential to have multiple refilling health pools. You're leeching into your mana, which is a second health pool. You're leeching into your energy shield, which is a main health pool, I suppose. And then you actually have a life flask that applies to your energy shield. You know, I think there's a lot of potential here for this to be really strong. I'm also curious to just see what the other passives are that are available to this Acolyte of Chayula, and maybe play around with like Waking Dream as well. These Into the Breach skills, they didn't really say what they are, but they look kind of cool. They just seem to spawn some portals that you'd run into and like get some buffs. Might be useless as a Chaos Inoculation build, might be great, never know. Alright, I know this video's been going on a little bit, but I just kind of wanted to talk about just not even really a sample rotation, just kind of a couple of interesting skills I think that are available to Monk, and another really good synergy here, and that would be Hand of Chayula, which you can link up to curses or marks, and you can apply this to several different things. Freezing Mark kind of made the most sense to me. You could maybe hook it up to, like, you know, whatever the cold curse is, Frostbite, if that actually exists in the game, or Despair if you're playing with that Acolyte of Chayula setup and you're actually getting some bonus chaos damage maybe. And then you can also take Whispers of Doom. Now, curses in PoE 2 seem to have like kind of a delay, like they'll go off in a very small area, but they have kind of a delay to them, and Whispers of Doom doubles that delay. But if you are just automatically applying them with Hand of Chayula, you dash, you hit the enemy with your hand, and it automatically applies those curses, and they're even stronger. That can really circumvent a lot of the like downside of using curses, and it also, like, you know, helps with kind of comboing. You Hand of Chayula in, you follow up with, I don't know, let's say Ice Strike, and then you hit him with a Killing Palm to finish him off, and suck up a power charge and use that later to hit him with the what is it? Flicker Strike? Yeah, Flicker Strike. Like, that can work really well. Now, at least as it's currently designed, Hand of Chayula seems like it's a single target skill, but I think that you could hook it up to Hex Bloom and make it so that you can curse that one guy, burn him down, and then have the curses go out to other enemies as well. Not sure that that would work, but it's definitely a possibility. Some of these other things like Heightened Curse maybe could link in there and be interesting, you know. We don't really know, but that was definitely something that's like kind of on my mind to test out first chance that I get. All right, I got into the edit and I realized there were a couple of things that I kind of glossed over that I wanted to actually stop and really emphasize, and then the first of those would be Leech in the passive tree. For Monk specifically, this is just really, really good. I mean, this is going to be good for anybody who is leeching, right? Slayers or whatever, you know, duelists, eventually when they come in, they'll probably want some of this stuff too, but like Siphon makes it so that you get 25% increased mana leeched. Let's see here, Immortal Thirst is another 25%. Manifold Method is 50%, and then weirdly 30% increased chance to inflict ailments against rares and uniques, so like more freezes, more shocks. Pretty great stuff. There's some other really good stuff over here as well, like Voracious giving you 20% of Leech being instant, and Bloodthirsty, 25% increased amount of leech, and then you leech life faster, not relevant for the Monk build, but still good. And then Volpact now exists as instant leech, totally instant, but no life flask. Potentially a very, very good thing. So I thought all of that leech stuff was really interesting. And then I did want to just kind of emphasize that on the poison front, I do think poison can be really good. I don't know that it's necessarily good right now, but there is like a support gem that gives you an extra poison, but less poison duration. And then there's also this Bursting Plague support that I just think is really, really dope. It gives you like an extra bonus when you poison enemies. You also build up Plague on them, and then Plague, when they die, Plague will trigger and do like an explosion. I think that's really, really cool. And then finally, Plague Bearer, the sort of buff from PoE 1, is now like a spirit reservation thing, but it seems like instead of just sort of being like a toggle on and off, it's either storing up Plague or slowly dispensing it to nearby enemies. It's a thing that you like store up and then you press the button again and it does like an instant big Plague Nova. And I think, again, that's pretty cool as well. So I do think poison builds could be pretty dope. I'm just not totally thrilled with the skill options at this point for poisons. Okay, so let's wrap things up. I think that there is basically limitless potential in terms of builds that can be really strong even with a single class. I feel like you can have dozens or hundreds of different ways of constructing the same ascendancy that all work. I really love that. I think the single support gems being unique is such a smart limitation that just makes it so that like we could build the exact same ascendancy, exact same skill, and still have characters that feel very different. Having multiple correct answers to the same question of how do you kill these bosses is really exciting. Obviously, you can tell I'm very excited. I'm definitely going to spend the next, decade of my life answering that question. So with that being said, I think Monk is the first answer I have, and while I am still slightly undecided between Invoker and Acolyte of Chayula, I think I'm leaning Acolyte of Chayula. I think that'll become more clear to me once I'm staring down the barrel of the Ascendancy trials and kind of able to look at every single one of their Ascendancy notes just to be sure, but it does seem like Acolyte of Chayula is probably the direction I'm leaning right now. That Leech stuff seems real fascinating. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching, and get hyped about PoE 2. Bye.